relationship, lovely man, talking about getting married, but real doubts to do with the fact that he is a heavy drinker. Grace, what's your advice to our emailer?
I married the alcoholic. He was my best friend. He's a lovely guy, and it became so bad that I became an alcoholic myself. Don't marry him. I know you love him, and I know it's going to break your heart to leave him, but you know your own concerns. Don't do it.
Lunchtime Live with Ciara Kelly.
With the matter private.
Weekdays from midday on News Talk. Off the ball. This is News Talk.
Now then, welcome back. If you're listening on the radio, if you're on our social channels, you're very welcome along. We're reviewing the Sunday papers as usual, and we have Vincent Hogan here in studio, Chief Sportswriter with the Irish Independent, and we have journalist Cliona Foley as well, who's also a broadcaster, presents the Off the Bench podcast here on Off the Ball. Guys, you're very welcome. Thanks for coming in as ever. We'll start with the headlines. So the Sunday Independent go with Munster last night. Munster refused to yield on a European night of high drama. They're 21 points apiece draw with Racing last night in Limerick, and Spurs here reach a high note to give Jose a winning start as Barney Ronay. We'll come to that in a moment, but that's the Sunday Independent lead. We have the Sunday World. It's lucky Live Varpool, VAR in red there. Crystal Palace 1, Liverpool 2. Jurgen Klopp, we can play better, but we won, and that's all I care about. And then beneath that, Solskjaer, tight-lipped on January sales. He's not planning on spending big in January, says Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. A big theme of Jose on the back pages, as you might imagine. West Ham 2, Spurs 3. Jose's back on song. Musical Mourinho is pitch perfect. A lot of this is because he seems to have been very impressed or very happy to have heard the dressing room play music after the win. So there's lots of musical puns across the back pages. So that's Jose there in the Sunday Mirror. Sunday Times, great picture of Jose. It's just quintessential Jose Mourinho picture, just half wink, half snarl. Still got it. Jose inspires Spurs to first away win in league since January. That's, again, their lead. And over here on the right-hand side, IFA, play-down, playoff security concerns. The Chief Executive of the Irish Football Association in Belfast, Patrick Nelson, says he has no security concerns about the prospect of an All-Ireland playoff final for Euro 2020 at Windsor Park, should it come to pass. Sun Sport then. Din hits, Jose Spurs are big noise again. Dimwits, the dimwits being Pellegrini, Emery and Marco Silva, who all seem to be under massive pressure. So Din hits, Jose Spurs are big noise again, and dimwits, flop trio, face music. Back page of the Mail on Sunday then. I'm back where I belong. Again, it's Jose, thumbs up, little wink, probably the same picture that's on the front page of the Sunday Times, but zoomed out a bit. Mourinho shows his approval during Spurs' win over West Ham yesterday. So they are your back pages, and it's to a point on Jose where you want to start. Cliona, one of the first things you said was you loved Barney Ronay on the front page of the Sunday Independent.
I really wouldn't read. I could read this all day and just keep reading it and read it again because it's so brilliant. I mean, he's a beautiful writer, Barney Ronay, but the first, we were just talking, like, it's becoming a dying art almost in sports writing because everything is done on the fly and it's into online now and kind of, but the art of writing a match report on the blow, as they call it in the business, is very, very difficult. And when you get somebody who can do it so well as he can do it and as he does it here, it's just a magnificent piece of writing. His first line is still humble on his fourth day in the job. And you want to keep going and read it after that. The second paragraph is, behold, for I am the humblest, the humblissimus, a superstar of humility. Frowning deeply, face contorted into a rictus of dignified integrity, Mourinho pointedly shook the hands of the West Ham players, who looked surprised. And there's a great line in it. He says there was a tentative round of applause towards the Tottenham fans, but from a distance, like a tremulous arm around the back of a cinema date on a around the back of a cinema seat on a successful second date. And it continues. It's even good the whole way through, isn't it, Vincent? It's not just the start as well.
It's glorious.
It's a real art form when glorious you can do
writing.
that.
And I think the general public mightn't understand how tight his deadline would be to do that. I mean, he would literally probably have the grace of half an hour to write that. And
why so tight for a lunchtime kickoff?
Oh, that was a lunchtime kickoff. No wonder it's good.
But even still, you're producing it. I mean,
but like,
they're probably shouting for it.
Yeah,
they want it within half an hour. You know,
he's just one of those.
He can do
it
all the time. Yeah, he can do it all the time.
And we've seen it with Jonathan Lowe as well. It's just such a gift to work on a deadline like that, which is tyrannising you basically most of the time, and to produce just a flow And what's beautiful here is it's kind of delicious sarcasm. It really is.
Really good at that.
It's not attacking Marino. It's not actually saying he's full of bull, but you can read between the lines that he thinks he's full of bull. You know, I think it's a beautiful piece. Yeah.
Like live sport is, you know, I mean, as writers, the problem always now is to find something new, because everybody's seen the match live or whatever it is. So when you have to do something like this, and you know, you have to get some colour into it, you have to get the background into it. I mean, the one above it is quite good as well. Brendan Fanning does a good match report of Racing and Munster last night as well. Again, quite a good quality, really good quality. They're not easy to do, and they're deceptive. The people who are good at them are deceptively good at it. There's, you know, and even when I love when they bring in like what the fans are shouting, and if you excuse the language, how shit must you be? We're winning away. The Tottenham fans sang midway through the second half. The answer to which would seem to be very shit. It's just a beautiful piece of writing, and you know, as I said, it's harder and harder to do, I think, because of the deadlines and people having to file for online and then maybe do something else as well, and juggling a couple of different things.
And I would presume that the percentage of colour has just got bigger and bigger and bigger over the years, because everyone has seen in high definition what's happened. Like the actual basics of giving information, those days are over. And you mentioned Jonathan Liu, who's very good at it as well. He did a spectacular one after Liverpool won in the Champions League last year.
Amazing.
Everyone had just seen the game and then went online to read about it, so he had to come up with something a bit special.
And I've heard him say he didn't think it was very good himself. You know, he's quite dismissive of that piece. But again, you know, a night match, what was it, an 8 o'clock kickoff? It's just extraordinary. And I've so much respect for people who can produce something almost lyrical under what I call the tyranny of a deadline, because when you have that space to fill, the deadline owns you, really, because you cannot just ring up and say, look, I'm going to miss the first edition. You can't miss the first edition. It's got to go.
It's right on your shoulder, isn't it?
Yeah, so it's a great skill.
So you do your fair share of them, I would think, as well, during the GAA season?
Well, it'd be more midweek soccer internationals. That's when you're really up against it, because the match, like last week's Monday's match, finishes about 25 to 20 to 10. Yeah. Your deadline is 5 to 10. And with the way we're working now as well, you've got to fit it into a shape. You've got to put a headline that fits, a sub-headline that fits. It's not particularly enjoyable.
Because I saw you in the press conference. So when you had your piece done by then?
The piece is well gone.
He'd file that already, and then he's gone to do another one. I
just go to the press conference to avoid the traffic.
Nothing better to do.
Absolutely.
Nick, by the way, was a bit spiky in that press conference.
Yeah, I think he misinterpreted one of the questions where he was being asked about John Egan going off at halftime with his head injury and how it compromised the substitutions he could make after that. And he thought he was being criticised for taking off John Egan, when in actual fact, the question was a very valid question, and he just was sparky. And then you asked him a question, and he said, "Are you winding me up?"
Yeah.
So it was just, I just thought, look, do you know what?
Well, he wasn't like that when I mean, that's changed in the last 18 months.
Do you know what? I just feel that there's almost Mick the cliche sometimes, and he just has to stick his chest out and be slightly intimidating. That was the way he was as a player. And I don't know, I'm bored by it. I'm really bored by that kind of stuff. I just feel, just come in and engage with the media, and if you're asked a question, just why bark at a question?
Generally, I found him to be good.
Mick is very good, particularly in one-to-one situations. Yeah. But I just thought he was a little bit needlessly irritable, I thought, the other night. And also a little bit maybe over-egging how well they'd played. To me, it was almost as if they'd shown a new philosophy, which they hadn't. I mean, my memory of the game, and again, you're doing a live piece, but the first half hour, there wasn't a chance created at either end. It's not as if it was this thrilling, you know, foot to the floor, let's attack these people. And it was a free shot, as Tommy Conlon points out in his piece, because you had the safety net anyway. So you had this free shot at Denmark. Now, it was brilliant to see them having a real go, but it was quite like the Switzerland game, I felt, where they really had a go when they fell behind. And you're kind of thinking, why don't you have a go earlier than that, you know? But I don't want to be critical of them, because it was a good performance against a technically better team.
We'll come on to that later on. There are a few different pieces on the Republic of Ireland. So, match reports, we've touched on that.
And I said, just come back to this, by the way, it isn't just a good colour piece. Like, he actually looks at what about, you know, how the team played structurally, you know, how he used the players. There's an awful lot in it, isn't it? I don't know how long it is. It's probably about, is it 500 words or maybe a little bit more? Yeah. But it's a really good, it's you know, if you're, it's 101, journalist, sports journalism 101.
Luxury.
That does help. Luxury, yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Joe blogs his tweet when you say 3 p.m. Was it 3 p.m. kickoff? I was sure it was the lunchtime. It was online by 3 p.m.
Right.
Well, that shows you how...
The online world. So it's been up for over 24 hours.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, or the guts of 24 hours. Joe Schmidt, people would be curious to see what Joe Schmidt has to say. Brendan Fanning has today's scoop. He was with Keith Duggan yesterday in the Irish Independent. So Brendan Fanning's turn today, pages 2 and 3 of the Irish Independent. And then Peter O'Reilly has written about the book on page 9 of the Sunday Times as well. I would say the book is being roundly panned by both Peter O'Reilly and Brendan Fanning in their various ways. At one stage in the middle of the interview, Fanning describes the book really as a house party where the kitchen is locked and the beer is in the fridge. And Peter O'Reilly shares the same sense that we didn't really get what we wanted from this book.
I'm intrigued by the lack of any affection in the rugby writers towards Joe Schmidt. And, you know, as somebody who has never interviewed him, a lot of my awareness of Schmidt, the man, is garnered from late show appearances where he's almost this Huckleberry Finn type of character. Oh, shucks, you know, thanks, Ryan, for saying such a nice thing. And yet, anecdotally, he's a pretty ruthless individual when it comes to his coaching, and rules by fear is an expression I've read a lot of the times. And what I see here is that this is being right across the board, the lack of warmth towards him from the rugby media.
Yeah.
You know, even we were out at a function last night, I had this argument with somebody where they were saying that they believed him to have ultimately been a failure. And I said, well, that's an outrageous thing to say, given all of the things he's achieved. But he was using the World Cup as the ultimate measure of, you know, did he make us better in a World Cup? And the answer is no. But, you know, his achievements are extraordinary.
Sport is about more than the World Cup.
Absolutely. Sure. And the achievements, he is categorically the best Irish rugby coach we've ever had, following two outstanding coaches in Declan Kidney, who won a Grand Slam, and Eddie O'Sullivan, who won 3 Triple Crowns. So we have had a period of extraordinary success in Irish rugby, but he brought it to another level. And it's just a real pity that it ended so flatly. Yeah. But it's very striking. I mean, Peter is really, really dismissive of the book.
Well, the headline is World Cup glossed over in Ordinary Joe - a very ordinary read. That's the headline.
Well, the subhead is even more telling. Joe Schmidt, a coach so focused on detail, omits plenty in his dull new book. And he uses the word dull repeatedly throughout.
The impression I get from the rugby writers is that they actually see a conceit even in the title.
Ordinary Joe.
Ordinary Joe.
Yeah.
That he clearly is not an ordinary Joe. But in putting that as the title of your book, it's almost conceited to do it. But like, the tone of it is captured here with Peter writing, this largely dull, unrevealing book stretches to 327 pages, yet Schmidt's analysis of the defeat by Japan, a pivotal career moment, amounts to a mere 3 paragraphs, consisting of complaints about referee Angus Gardner and praise for the Japanese. And that's the tone of it. And you know, Rory O'Connor in our paper during the week was very much of the same vein, that this feeling that he hasn't taken responsibility for what went wrong in Japan. And, you know, it really went wrong that day, particularly against the hosts, where he didn't pick Johnny Sexton, for example. And there was a sense that he was playing the long game, that we were already having beaten the Scots, we were already in the quarterfinals. And just the whole flatness of the year in general, when you look at the performances that bookended the Six Nations, the opening day defeat against England at the Aviva, and then a lamentably poor performance in Cardiff against the Welsh in the rain. And there was a kind of a stasis or something about the team right through the year, and that's not really dealt with, it seems, in the book. I haven't read the book, I have to say. I'm not sure I will read it, you know, looking at the reviews.
I'm about 15 pages in. So, I mean, I'm not, I can't say this has whetted the appetite massively.
Yeah.
And just so there's no conflict of interest, I'm doing 2 evenings where I'm interviewing him. And so, I mean, I'm looking forward to that, and hopefully that can still be a good conversation and you can maybe get more out of it. And one of the criticisms levelled here is the lack of ghostwriter. It means that maybe you need someone to push and go, well, hang on, we need a bit more on that, and we need a bit more on that. Because if you do look at his, you know, someone, I think it's Peter Riley, or it's Brendan, excuse me, but one of them makes the point that you can boil down his explanation for what went wrong into almost a single line, which is effectively that they stopped prioritising the next match and the week ahead.
Yeah, and Six
and
Nations,
then confidence ebbs away and suddenly you lose momentum, and it's very hard to kind of get the thing back on track. And I kind of accept that as a fair enough theory as to what went wrong. And when you think about it, that's a big admission in a way. That means you mismanaged the approach the entire year, the crucial year. You know, that's a big failing. But I suppose it's the lack of detail.
Lack of detail, exactly. I mean,
but it is a big admission. You'd like, because he says someone texted him from the New Zealand camp saying, yeah, we did the same in 07. We put the World Cup ahead of everything else, and it just made it, you know, it didn't work out for us.
Yeah.
So you can kind of say that's like, your choice, and that's a big admission of failure in a way, but people seem to want a bit more.
Well, I think it's understandable they want a bit more, because everything about him is so detailed up until this point, if you like. Yeah. He goes into such detail over everything. And I was saying to you, I interviewed him about 3 months before the World Cup for a magazine piece that wasn't going to appear until around the World Cup. And I remember him saying to me, and I put him back over it a few times because I was surprised he said it, and I said, how do you feel about the World Cup? And he said, I'm terrified. And I thought that was a very strange thing for the manager of the senior team to be saying. And I said, really terrified? And he went, yeah, terrified. We've never got past the quarter-final. He seemed to be obsessed with it. The thing about the book, I think, that's interesting, and Vincent has ghostwritten books, is some of the best books involve another person, because they're the ones who are really going to draw the stuff out of you that you don't want to talk about, that may be central to who you are and what you've done. And so I'm really surprised, first of all, that he's brought out a book. I suspect the man doesn't sleep at all. Well, he seems to me one of those people who never turns off. And I remember asking him and saying to him, do you not sleep before games? And he said, no, I sleep like a log before games because I've everything done. After we lose, I can't sleep. So you'd imagine that this is just like keeping a diary. All this stuff has been done all the time. He's constantly in motion. But a ghostwriter, I think, that's what surprised me, is that first of all, it's come out so quickly. No time for reflection, really, and the World Cup is just kind of stuck onto it. I haven't read it yet either. And secondly, that there wasn't. But the lack of a ghostwriter reflects so much of what we know, which is that he, as a coach, he wanted to control everything, and he wanted to control the media as well. And the media, clearly, rugby media have struggled badly with that element of it. And there is an element of all managers trying to control the media, but it seems to have been extreme in this case.
I think that lack of a ghostwriter, it's actually captured by the rigour with which Brendan, in his interview with Sunday Independent, asks some questions. And, you know, for example, it's really bizarre to me that he doesn't name his mum or dad in the book, as if it's some kind of breaking a code of privacy. I mean, really, why? You know, it just seems a really bizarre thing. And Brendan grills him on this. But also, there's a really interesting thing where he talks about his granddad changing his name during the Second World War.
That's really
Schmidt
interesting.
to Smith, because they were getting bricks through the window. And you're just thinking, I think he's one of the most interesting figures we've ever had in Irish sport.
Yeah.
And it just seems such a wasted opportunity that we're not going to learn more about him. That it seems to be large tracks of the book seem to be a coaching manual almost.
I think if you could broadly break it up into 3 parts based on Rory's review of it, the opening part is maybe his childhood, I suppose, or, you know, his kind of formative years. But again, things like not mentioning his father by name is striking. Yeah, or his mother by name. Yeah. And then the middle section is almost his philosophy. You know, so there's a chapter on how he handles the media. There's a chapter on, you know, the mental aspect of the game, all that kind of stuff. And then the final third is a diary of the 2018 Grand Slam winning year, followed by a diary of the 2019 World Cup. So that's it. So even with Brendan Fanning, and certainly with Keith Duggan yesterday, he concedes it's not a straightforward autobiography.
No, it's not. Yeah.
He said he says at one stage, I've read lots of autobiographies and I find them interesting, but I don't necessarily get anything from them or a real insight into how they think. It's a whole lot of events they're involved in, but not quite how they think. So that's his maybe his an insight into what he was aiming to do with it. So part coaching manual maybe to a point for aspiring coaches to see how this guy approached aspects of the job.
Do you know what I'm struck by? I think a lot of the Irish public will be a little bit confused by the attitude of the media towards him, in the sense that we all had those pictures of the day they were beaten by New Zealand in the World Cup, and all of the supporters reaching out to grab his hand and thank him for everything. And I can see there's a kind of two parallel worlds here, where you have the media who have one view of him. And it's very funny where Brendan asks him about including a chapter on the media in the book. And I find his response really, really interesting. He said, the media chapter was longer than that because I started off saying how the world has changed for the media, and I had a couple of things about the big takeovers, not your one, which is too recent, but more in the last couple of years, and how tough it is in the current environment where change is almost a constant. You're being sold to people, or there's a change in emphasis. I talked a little about the pressures to get something.
On journalists, yeah.
Now, I don't think there's a rugby writer that would see that as sincere. I think they would say, my God, Joe, please, don't come up with that kind of idea that you cared for the media and the pressure they were under, when he was very controlling of the media message that was getting out there. Again, I'm only getting this anecdotally from the writers, but if you said anything remotely critical of Joe, it came back to you, and you were told in no uncertain terms that was not well thought of. So I think there's a deep insincerity to that answer that he gives to Brendan about the media, and it's very hard to think anyone would read it and not see a certain insincerity in that.
Brendan comes at it from very interesting angles, all right, like that trying to get to the heart of why he doesn't talk about his family and the family history and lots of stuff, but also that media thing is interesting because he cites him talking the cosy setting from his time assisting Vern Cotter in Bernard Platy, where the local journalists used to travel on the team bus and pop up regularly in the changing room. Now, what Brendan says is he was, I think he's quoting him saying he was local, trusted and positive by nature, and the access he had to the team and players was much greater than I've experienced since. And Brendan said, it sounds like the man was so deeply embedded he should have written his name on the soles of his shoes. And there is this conflict where it always appeared to seem that Joe expected the national media here to be rah-rahing for the team always and couldn't cope with it when they didn't. And I suppose he also mentions here the fact that there's only a very, very passing to the Belfast rape case as well in this book, and again that's something that people probably would have expected him to elaborate on.
Yeah. Well, he actually says that Penguin advised him against going into any detail on the rape case.
Well, it's something I'm planning to talk to him about, so we'll have to see how that goes.
But I think Brendan...
If we step back from the media thing for a second, just to deal with that, and you talk about his popularity, his enduring popularity, and I watched him on the Late Late Show on Friday, and find myself just warming to him.
Absolutely, yeah.
Incredibly charming.
Yeah.
And I think it's right when someone says, look, we understand this is sport, this can happen. It's not like you wanted this to happen, and that's, it's not like you should be persecuted or judged or shunned in any way. And there is a bigger picture to the two World Cups. And 2015, like even Luke Fitzgerald in his podcast, who was involved, and very miffed he didn't start that game against Argentina, would still say, you lose 5 players, any team loses those 5 players, you're just not the same team. That's just a bit of bad luck. And okay, 2019 things have gone badly, but you can't ignore the other stuff, which was so successful. But on the media, so if we step back for a second, I think the reason those fans are still so on side and the general public is still so on side is they will look at the media and they will all consume it, and if there's a breaking story, it'll be the most read on a website because they want the information too. But I think they'll look at it and they'll say, well, Joe's attitude to the media, Joe Schmidt's attitude to the media is they are always stirring, they're looking for stories, they're looking for angles, they're looking for info I don't want to get out yet, they're looking for the player who doesn't think Joe's a good coach. This is his attitude now, I'm not saying right or wrong, but his attitude ultimately boils down to, they don't help me. They don't help the players, and I just don't want them involved. And my priority is for Ireland to win rugby matches, not helping the media, so I'm going to give them as little as possible.
Of course, and perfectly understandable.
Yeah, and I think the general public's attitude is, damn right.
Well, my
do
point,
what you have to do.
Yeah, but my thing then is if you're going to write a book, be honest about that and say that's my attitude.
Fair point, yeah. No, I'd accept that. Yeah, I'd accept that.
And I don't think that's
reality.
I don't think that's in the book. I haven't read the book either, but all the excerpts I've seen and everything I've seen of what he said, and I read the Keith Duggan piece very closely on Saturdays in Times as well, is that that's not what he's saying here, you know.
Fair enough.
I think the other thing that we shouldn't lose sight of is I think he's actually a very nice man. I think
by all accounts, he seems to go all around the country giving his time for free or else for charity and doing talks and engaging with people and very personable, and you can discount all of that and say, that's PR stuff. But I mean, if you do it every day in, day out, week after week, then
when I interviewed him and he could tell me about working in King's House with the kids, or not in the school up in the Midlands, he could tell you the names of the players who scored the tries when he coached these kids to a Leinster B title. Do you know what I mean? That's how much he cares about the game. That's how much he cares about players. That's how deeply he's rooted in his game. He really does care and seems to be a genuinely nice person. But there has to be another side of him to be as successful as he is as a manager. And it's the difficulty in seeing that, or him revealing that to us, I think, probably leaves a gap.
Yeah, but part of me actually was totally in agreement with Brian O'Driscoll's what he said on the Late Late Show.
Yeah.
And,
I agree with that.
And I kind of said, yes, he deserves to hear those words because he has been phenomenal in Irish rugby.
Yeah, I think he's getting a very tough deal at the moment over 2019, personally. I think it went wrong, and it's a real pity his hooker was 37. He wasn't unaware of the fact. He did play Sean Cronin in Rome. He was trying to move that on. It's not ideal that Conor Murray goes from being the best scrum half in the world to one arm shrunk compared to the next, not fit.
Yeah.
It's not ideal that Johnny Sexton turned 34, and he's playing very well now, actually, and did okay in the World Cup, but that partnership wasn't what it was. All of these things are not ideal, and they are part of the story. Look,
well, I think there is some legitimate criticism, though, of the style that Ireland played, that attritional style, when you have such a shallow pool of players as well. Like, I do think that's something that probably I'd like to see him talk about. Or
well, he did. It was either with Keith or it's in this piece. I think it was with Keith Duggan yesterday. He did say, like, he laughs at the why don't Ireland offload a bit more. And
We
missed South Africa winning the World Cup.
I know, and that's the reality. Is a big beefy team of Man Mountains went and won the thing exactly. Yeah.
And you know what? The team that won the Grand Slam in 2018, it wasn't as if they were all singing, all dancing. They were something that we don't see in Irish sport very often, and that is clinical. I remember the game at Twickenham on St. Patrick's Day, and they were utterly clinical in what they did. And they had these little wrinkles in terms of their plays, but they'd only show them fleetingly. They weren't this offloading like the Japanese were in the World Cup. But they became a wonderful rugby team in 2018. And, you know, we didn't need them to play like the Barbarians to be wonderful to watch.
And I don't, people say, well, none of that counts because of the World Cup. I don't think that's true.
I don't either, no.
Obviously, I don't think that's true. Obviously, the World Cup is more important, but I don't think 2018 wasn't a massive achievement.
No, it was. But also the problem for Schmidt always seemed to me is that he made the World Cup the barometer. He had constantly, repeatedly said, this will be my defining, you know, this will define me, really. Everything else, this is what it's all been leading up to. And then when it all fell apart so badly, people will pile on, naturally.
But it definitely, look, I've heard the same stuff anecdotally from the rugby writers on the beat, and they're not all saying it for the hell of it. So, it was obviously, there was a lot of friction there, for sure, and I'm sure it wasn't all on them. I mean, it was Joe's approach as well.
But like you say, Joe, the general public really couldn't give a toss.
No,
couldn't
care less. No, couldn't care less. It's funny when you talk, I gotta go to an ad break, when you talk about the lack of ghostwriter. And even I was thinking, your book with Paul McGrath just there, not only does he have a ghostwriter, but then you get other people involved in the story to tell other moments that Paul probably wouldn't like to have told himself. And that was probably no fun for him. But if you want to present the truth, not only does it need a ghostwriter, it might also need more than just the subject.
Yeah, but just reading Brendan's interview, it just gives you a flavour that there's so much more depth to this man that you'd love to explore and hear about. And it seems that we're not going to get that depth in the book.
Not yet, possibly. He says, I wrote it partly because I wanted to keep some control of my own story, is what he said to Brendan finally at one stage.
He seems to indicate, Joe, that he released it now because he thought that somebody else was going to write a book.
He certainly says he got wind from a player. Someone was going around talking to the players about him, On the Ordinary Joe thing, That's from an email he sent to a family friend after they beat the All Blacks, where the friend from New Zealand was saying, "Are you the same Joe Schmidt?"
Guy.
And he wrote, he kind of quipped, "Yeah, I'm the same ordinary Joe."
Yeah.
So Fanning says to him, "It's not credible." And Schmidt says, "You might say that, but I don't see it and I don't feel it. Sometimes I see it, the New Zealand job at the moment, and there's a lot of talk around. And one of my mates sent me this article yesterday saying that New Zealand desperately needs Joe. I don't see that. I see the headline, but I don't feel it. They'll do really well without me. They have great coaches and great people involved. So part of it is I'm trying to tell people I'm no different from what I was," is his response to that. So that's on page 2 and 3 of the Sunday Independent. "No Ordinary Joe" is the headline. So that's Brendan Fanning on Joe Schmidt, and Peter O'Reilly is writing about the book as well. I have to take a very short ad break and go to news headlines, and then we're back with the rest of the newspapers.
The Sunday Papers on Off the Ball. Join the conversation. Text us on 53106. Texts cost 30 cents.
Every bumpy road, every bit of weather, every school run, every moment of reflection, every
It's rush hour on a Friday. What did you expect?
little disagreement, every tight squeeze, everything about a Skoda is made for Ireland.
Let the festivities begin with a third off our wonderful range of artificial trees and Christmas lights. Homebase. Feels good to be home. Offer ends 18th of December.
Just when you thought all Black Fridays are the same, there's no need to get excited. Easy Living comes along with an exclusive sale and you are personally invited. Designer deals, absolute steals in living, dining and more. Sofas and chairs, beds and homewares. Online and in every store. But you won't find these offers anywhere else. So hurry before it's too late. The Easy Living Interiors Black Friday sale, definitely worth the wait. Easy Living Interiors, Cork, Waterford, Navan, Naas, Sandyford, Drogheda and Wexford. Sale now on.
Black Friday again. Wouldn't it be nice to get something more inspiring, more priceless? Like sharing special moments on a tropical island or taking in a sunset over a perfect forest. Explore a world of priceless experiences with Emirates special return fares from €499 when you fly from Dublin. Book by the 26th of November 2019. Fly Emirates. Fly better. Terms, conditions and fare exclusions apply.
Today, it's Sheffield United v Man United in a tough test for both teams. And with Now TV, you can watch all the action live for a one-off payment of just €10. Hold on, they're checking with VAR.
That's confirmed, it's €10.
You've got to love the modern game. So, to only pay for the games that matter to you, grab a Now TV Sky Sports Day Pass. Search Now TV Sports. 18 plus, content streamed via internet, full terms apply.
No matter what business you're in, at Electric Ireland, we know that having partners you can rely on is more important than ever. That's why, as Ireland's largest electricity supplier, we ensure you'll get a plan based on what's best for your needs and ambitions. So join over 90,000 businesses already partnering with us across the country. To find out how we can help your business, now and in the future, visit electricireland.ie/business today.
Our amazing Black Tag sale is now on at Curry's PC World. Get your kitchen ready for Christmas with great deals on a huge range of premium kitchen appliances. Trade up to a large screen TV with massive savings on brands like LG, Sony and Samsung. Pick up the perfect gift this year with wireless headphones, smartwatches, gaming and more. And we've got unbelievable offers across the store with big brand laptops and tablets. We won't be beaten on price, so get in store or online at currys.ie. T's and C's apply.
Over the last number of years, AIB have been working to build a more sustainable business. We have invested in wind energy projects, launched a €5 billion climate action fund, signed a low-carbon pledge, and yet it's still not enough. We will keep telling ourselves that every day. AIB alone is not the solution to climate change, but we're doing everything we can to be a part of it. AIB, we pledge to do more. Allied Irish Banks plc is regulated by the Central Bank of Ireland.
What would you expect from the new Volkswagen Passat? An elegant, dynamic exterior and spacious interior? Advanced driver assistance systems for easier, safer driving? A plug-in hybrid option for a cleaner, greener drive? Expect all that and more, so you can be more and do more. The new Volkswagen Passat. What did you expect? Search Volkswagen Passat.
There were magic nights
this Christmas at Golden Discs. Magic Nights, the new collection of songs from Christy Moore.
In the prison of the gift.
And Thanks for the Dance, the new album from Leonard Cohen.
So I never had
new albums from Christy Moore and Leonard Cohen. Out now at Golden Discs and goldendiscs.ie.
At Eason, it's Black Friday with 3 for 2 on the latest bestsellers, including Ethna Shortall's endearing 3 Little Truths, Sophie White's witty Filter This, Brian O'Connell's Fascinating the Personals, The Dirtbird's Self-Help Guide, and the hilarious I Am the Border So I Am by Border Irish. All 3 for 2 in store at Eason now. Eason, be inspired.
Across Ireland. This is the IMRO Radio Awards Station of the Year. This is News Talk.
At 2 o'clock good afternoon, I'm Sarah Jane Tobin. 15 of the 16 migrants found in the back of a lorry on a ferry to Rosslare last Thursday are no longer in state care. They all sought international protection, which is effectively seeking refugee status when they arrived here. They were accommodated in a Dublin Direct Provision Centre, but they were free to leave the accommodation. Gardaí have confirmed the 16th member of the group is a juvenile who has now been taken into the care of the Child and Family Agency, TUSLA. A 23-year-old County Armagh man has been charged in connection with the Essex lorry deaths. 39 people were discovered in the back of a refrigerated truck in the UK last month. Christopher Kennedy was arrested in Buckinghamshire on Friday afternoon and is due to appear before Chelmsford Magistrates Court tomorrow. A man in his 50s has been arrested on suspicion of murder in connection with the death of an inmate at Cloverhill Prison on Friday night. At around midnight, Gardaí and emergency services were called to the scene following an incident involving 2 prisoners. A man aged in his 30s was pronounced dead at the scene. A post-mortem examination is being carried out, but the results will not be released for operational reasons. The arrested man is being detained at Clondalkin Garda Station for questioning. 3,100 premature deaths each year are being attributed to air pollution. A new EPA survey has found the situation is getting worse and worse as the cold weather has set in over the last few months. According to today's Business Post, there are increasing fears that people are flouting smoky coal bans around the country, which can lead to an increase in hospital admissions for heart and lung conditions. The Green Party councillor Peter Kavanagh says it's not just the big industrious cities that are affected.
That's the most shocking part of this report is how it's rural towns that are really bearing the brunt of this. I mean, we have a smoky coal ban in Dublin, which has gone some ways to helping air pollution, although parts of Dublin are still notorious black spots. But to see Letterkenny and Ennis figure among the worst towns, it really shows that this is not confined to the major industrial centres like Dublin and Cork. This is something that affects all of us right around the country, so it's something that we all need to be invested in.
And a fundraising page to help a charity save koalas from Australia's deadly bushfires has raised more than £1 million. It's feared more than 1,000 have died in the flames in recent weeks. In one area, a rescue dog wearing special socks has been sent into burnt-out zones to find surviving koalas. And that's all from the newsroom for now. Good afternoon.
News Talk Weather.
Thanks to the AA, you can find our lowest car insurance price online, guaranteed.
A dry but rather misty start to the day. Many areas will hold dry, albeit dull for daylight hours. Rain will develop in Munster, though, this afternoon. Later this evening, rain will move up into parts of Connacht and Leinster, along with freshening southeasterly winds, with highest temperatures expected of 7 to 10 degrees. And now you're up to date on News Talk.
The Sunday Papers on Off the Ball.
Now, welcome back. Cliona Foley and Vincent Hogan here in the studio looking through the Sunday Papers. We touched really only in the... Excuse me, sorry, microphone not working. Welcome back, Cliona Foley and Vincent Hogan here in studio. We touched on the first half of the paper review really on match reports and Joe Schmidt's new book. He's interviewed by Brendan Fanning in the Sunday Independent today. Just before we leave the rugby, you both noticed in the Sunday Business Post, Gary Doyle has done a profile of the next man in, Andy Farrell.
Yeah, I thought this was interesting, and actually interesting that the Sunday Business Post from today is no longer going to be the Sunday, it's going to be the Business Post, and it's going to have an online presence, and it will be interesting to see if they put sport on their online presence, I think, which is interesting because Gary Doyle has been doing some really good stuff. He did a brilliant piece on Troy Parrott and that whole, that Murder Mile, Centre City, that has produced all these good young footballers. There's a brilliant piece in the magazine a few weeks ago. This is one on Andy Farrell, and it was really interesting. I had no idea some of the facts of Andy Farrell's life, and one of the most interesting things is that he was a father at 16, and he was working as an apprentice at the time on 50 quid, a joinery apprentice at 50 quid at the time. And of course that son that was born then is now a very famous rugby player as well himself. So good profile on him probably. I found it quite interesting, but because I don't know a lot about him really, and it talks as well about some of the things that have not gone well, and his role for Ireland as a defensive coach, and now the fact that he's taken over. But he's made that leap obviously from rugby union to rugby league, from rugby league to union, and now Gary's making that comparison, I suppose, that he's now making the jump from the man behind to the man in front now, and how that will change. Could possibly change a lot of what he does, given exactly what we've been talking about with Joe Schmidt.
Yeah, there's just one expression that Gary uses at the end, and that is a bit of Joe fatigue. And I think that is the key issue when you think about, how he's going to be as the new Irish coach. I mean, it's a largely complimentary profile of him, but you just wonder, if the sense of a dressing room that's gone flat in the last 12 months, and the voice that they're going into when they reconvene in the new year is a voice that's been part of that dressing room for the last 3 or 4 years. It is potentially a problem, I think, and it's going to be very interesting to see. He's clearly a very strong personality, and that's the one thing that comes across from this profile. As Cliona says, a dad at 16 years of age, a guy who, for the majority of his caps in the Great Britain rugby league team, he was captain, so he has a natural sense of authority about him. He's a strong personality. He will need to be, because he's got to put his own stamp on this, and he's going into a situation where Joe was just such a profoundly strong manager himself that it's a very tough gig he's facing, in my view.
Yeah, it's not a coaching ticket which has got people off their seats just yet either. No. Mike Cadden is attack coach. People are questioning that, so we'll have to see. And it's funny, for all the World Cup is the most important thing out there. If things don't get off to a good start in the Six Nations, I don't suspect the same people will be saying, well, it's only the Six Nations, it doesn't really matter.
The World Cup doesn't exist now. The World Cup is so
bizarre,
far
and it's
away
over, so it goes so fast.
Andy Farrell may not be there for the next World Cup if things don't go well.
Yeah.
So, and the IRFU, as any of the former coaches will tell you, the IRFU focus big time on achieving in the Six Nations. That's their bread and butter.
They need full houses, they need excitement,
absolutely.
They need the corporate
That's why
stuff.
they have to concentrate on it, and the style of play is probably affected by having to do well there as well.
Well, won't it be interesting to see if that changes, if we were suddenly playing champagne rugby, or what kind of style of play the team will follow now. He's worked under Lancaster, he's worked under Schmidt, so that'll be interesting as well. That's on page 23 of Andy Farrell, still only 44.
Yeah,
yes.
I know, that's what really interested me. I didn't realise he was so young.
Yeah. On the Living with Lions documentaries, if you watch any of them, the more recent ones, where Warren Gatland is there and he's the defence coach, he comes across incredibly well when he speaks to the team. As you said, the natural air of authority and likeable. So.
And Gatland is quoted in this speaking very highly of him. So, look, he's clearly an impressive guy, but he's got a tough act to follow.
Away from the rugby then, you have a GAA piece in front of you. This is... well, a bit different, and it's very interesting. It's Philip Lanigan in the Mail on Sunday. Yeah, and do you know what? I actually was watching this on the 6-1 News during the week, where John Horan, the GAA president, was being interviewed about basically the last 3 unmarked graves of the 14 people killed in Bloody Sunday in Dublin 99 years ago, were replaced with commemorative headstones. And I was very struck by John Horan's quotes about particularly Jerome O'Leary, a 10-year-old schoolboy, murdered as he watched the early stages of the game on a wall behind the canal goal. With his family line gone, none of his relatives could be traced for this event. And it was an expression that John Horan used that I thought was a lovely expression. It said, "We are here today as Jerome's family." And I thought that was a lovely thing to think, that all of this time later, when they couldn't trace any of this poor boy's real family, that the GAA were saying, well, he's our family. And the GAA gets hammered, and rightly so, in a lot of different situations at the moment. I thought that was beautiful. I thought there was something really dignified about what went on this week. And
Of course, we've all probably read The Bloodied Field, Michael Foley's brilliant book on the atrocity. And Michael is quoted a lot in this piece. It is right and proper that these people are remembered and their memory is dignified as well.
And the context for it was that these were the last 3 unmarked graves of the 14 people that were killed. And as Vincent says, I think that there is a cultural and a political and a historical resonance in the GAA that they don't get credit for sometimes. You know, you go to the GA Museum and there's stuff in there that really just makes you gasp and stand back and look at things. You know, across everything, even in the way that they've maintained the history of the sport, that other sporting organisations in the country don't do at all. So while there'll be pages, and there's double-page spread in the Sunday where they're getting hammered from every angle today, I do think sometimes we take for granted some of the great stuff they do at community, and that history, the depth of their history in every corner of the country, and it's going to be particularly strong next year when a lot of commemorative stuff will happen for Bloody Sunday. So it's a good read, and I think
in the era of fake news, and as somebody who studied history, this business about Hill 16 and the GPO, I was never a fan of that. I mean, how they got away with that for so long, and we all thought it was harmless. I'm not so on board. But it's in a country where we're thinking of getting rid of history, inexplicably. You know, a lot of people listening mightn't even realise, like Philip Lanigan lays it out. I'm sure any sports fan knows, or if you've seen Michael Collins, even the movie, you're vaguely aware. So, 99 years ago, and there was an IRA attack on British intelligence forces, which resulted in 14 men dead. This was the reaction to it, rather. So the IRA, across a night, took out British intelligence operatives in Dublin, and then there was a response, this violent reprisal at Croke Park, where Tipperary were playing Dublin. So there was indiscriminate shooting, took out 14 people, including Michael Hogan, who had the Hogan stand named in his memory, and as you said, Jerome Leary, a 10-year-old boy. And Michael Foley, in his comments, he was there on Thursday at the cemetery, he was making the point that we're talking about 3 children, 10, 11 and 14. There was a woman, a fiancé, killed the week of her wedding. Barmen, farmers, labourers, fellas from Tip, Dublin, Wexford, Limerick. And he says if you want to go deeper into the complexity of the thing, he mentions that Feary was wearing British Army gear because he had served in World War I. And that Patrick O'Dowd, who was shot, was trying to save the life of a soldier. He says Ireland was not black and white; it never has been, which is quite. Again, I didn't realise any of that, I must say.
Neither did I, and I think some of the quotes from Michael are really, really good in the sense that there's a great sanity to what he's saying. One of them is...
He's very reasonable, isn't he? Yeah.
It's not about waving flags or proclaiming the blood of the martyrs that fell on the soil of Croke Park and sanctified Croke Park. It's nothing to do with that. What sanctifies Croke Park is the games. You can still be aware of your fundamental identity, where you came from and what shaped you, but it doesn't have to bind you to the past. And I think that's brilliant. And I think it just, there's a real sense of sanity in what Michael is saying about the whole thing, rather than the table thumping, you know, rah, 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 you're on one side or the other.
Yes.
It's a very nuanced thing.
Which we see, and we see so much of that, you know, that on social media now. You see that, you know, you have to be on one side. It's so polarised. You have to have it. He says he says we now have the freedom 99 years later to look on these things. It doesn't mean we don't all condemn what happened. It was an atrocious thing, but it gives us the opportunity to have a bit more understanding of the wider story and the complexity of it, you know.
Yeah, far too nuanced and reasonable altogether. They're going to have a Dublin-Tipperary match in Croke Park to mark the 100-year anniversary, by the way, and the international rules match is fixed for November 21st, 2020. So there's going to be lots of stuff, and they've outlined a load of events which are already organised, so they're well ahead in the planning stages. But there you are, 3 unmarked graves from that day. I just wouldn't have thought in 1920 that it wouldn't be possible to identify all the dead, but there you are.
Yeah.
So well, you mentioned if the GA, you know, they're taking a hammering. Look no further than pages 2 and 3 of the Sunday Independent. No one gets out alive.
Yeah, I mean, there are 3 stories across 2 pages, and the GA is getting hammered, and including this. They involved the I suppose local level county board. John Green is talking about a situation in Meath where the former county chairman obviously was sending messages to a referee who reported him, and the disciplinary system has been gone through and no action has been taken against the former chairman, and so he goes through that in great depth.
Yeah. We wouldn't do that justice to try and talk it all right now. It's quite dense, but it's there and it's given lots of prominence.
Yeah, and then Joe Brawley is talking, because it is the week where the CPA pulled out, and this subject is treated by quite a few people across the papers, is the CPA, the Club Players Association, pulling out of their negotiations with the GPA, and so Joe goes through that in detail, and I suppose talks a lot about his continuing themes really of his criticism of the GA, which is basically that the suits up in Croke Park do one thing
and on really that for a second, on the CPA, because they first came on the scene about 3 years ago. And I remember we had them on a few times and lots of very good people involved. And we were almost, as media, saying, well, is strike a possibility? You know, everyone looking for that line. You could shut down the entire GAA country here by calling strike, and club players would follow. And they said, no, we don't want to go like that. We want to talk calmly and rationally. I always felt they were very measured in their approach. And then there was a congress where they basically weren't going to be recognised at all. And a delegate, the former president from Kilkenny, Nicky Brennan, stood up and said, oh, hang on here a second, let's just not rush into this. And again, I think the CPA took that and didn't make a big deal out of it. I feel they've been reasoned all the way, and then what's happened this week is they've pulled out of this fixtures, well, as Joe Bradley calls it, the fixtures farce force, so the task force to sort out the fixtures, and they said, the CPA, that it felt to them like a Trojan horse, which was going to maintain the status quo. And Joe Bradley makes the point, you have Micheál Brodie, CEO of one of Ireland's biggest companies, who's the CPA, one of the main people involved in the CPA. Beside him, you have Joan Keogh involved, the brilliant chief of JP Morgan's Asia division. On the other side, Liam Griffin, one of the country's most respected entrepreneurs, lifelong servant of the GA community, and talks about them being very high caliber GA people. They had assumed that the task force would be compiled in good faith. Instead, they discovered it was what Joe Bradley says was a stitch-up job, leading them to announce they could not in good conscience continue to be part of the process. That is quite damning of the process, because they have always seemed to me like very reasoned, good, well-meaning people.
I think it's very important that Joe highlights the calibre of people involved in the CPA, because it's very easy to dismiss that body as somehow parochial and small-minded and just not really up to speed on the bigger issues, whereas they're very serious people involved, and they're completely exasperated with what they clearly feel they're just getting, pushed aside, really. And I suppose the introduction of the two-tiered championship, for example, it immediately communicates to them that they're not really being listened to.
That was kind of the straw that broke their back.
And I've had arguments with different people. I had an argument with Kieran McGeaney and Desi Farrell. I was on a panel last year one time where I actually believe that the GA as it stands at the moment is completely unnatural. And I felt, if you go back last year in an interview with the Sunday Times, Paul Flynn gave an interview in which he more or less said that he could see semi-professionalism coming into the GA. And to me, that would have been a real red line crossed a few years ago. But it was extraordinary that it just passed without much debate. And I think the separation between club, volunteerism, and the elite level of county, and by elite level I mean a very small handful of counties in hurling and football that can actually compete at the highest level. And it's just not a natural environment anymore. And I really think that right now all of these are red lights flashing. And the fact that Joe Brawley essentially writes the same column nearly every week, but does it very well in a different way, doesn't necessarily mean he's wrong in my view. I think it's a really, really tricky time for the GA, and that's why I say I compliment John Horan on what happened, in Glasnevin Cemetery during the week. But I think the GA is in really choppy waters at the moment, and I sometimes think that Pádraig Duffy must be relieved to have stepped away from it after all those years, because I'm not sure where it's heading.
Well, Micheál Clifford in the Mail on Sunday is interesting as well, because he talks about it as well, and he says there was nothing so urgent about this introduction of second tier that it had to be pushed through, and he's like echoing that feeling about everybody, about why has this drive, and it's obviously a drive now that has driven a wedge again with the CPA. But he does make a point which I think is really relevant when he says no one should be caught into thinking that there's an easy answer to this. One of the flaws in the CPA's fix the fixtures slogan is that, a bit like let's get Brexit done, while it is catchy, it can also be a gross oversimplification of an extremely complex challenge, and that is so true.
Yeah.
You know, counties have different systems, divisional competitions, championships that aren't championships, leagues that are half championships. I mean, the complications of the inter-county, of the county club system, and then to try to feed that. It's not a simple task. I think the CPA, though, really, you know, were very honest and upfront about everything they did, and certainly there was a radical change that has driven them out, and that's not going to help anybody. But you know, to come to the same articles as well, Colin O'Rourke has a piece. Again, he's no lover of the GPA, the Gaelic Players Association, and he has a really, you know, a very strongly worded, again, criticising why this competition was on, and you know, the hurling one that was on last week, and denigrating that. But he makes one. At the one at the end of it, he says, "Let me be clear on one thing: the GA does need a body representing players, one that plays a key role in the big questions like fixtures, burnout, scholarships, and so on." I mean, I think everybody's agreed on that. You have to have that because players need representatives. But he says. He's saying, I believe a large body of players of weaker counties who are not happy with the GPA and feel a ruling clique have lost the run on himself. Well, I don't see him quoting anybody to say that. But also, he says, the GA is facing a crisis on this issue. The GA at central level have no control over the GPA. In other words, he's saying the GPA are the tail wagging the dog. In fact, I've believed for a long time that county managers are the ones who are wagging the dog, and they're the ones that the GA has no control of, and they're affecting a lot of things as well. So it's a very complicated thing, and Vincent is right. You're constantly reading articles now of people who are pretty much dyed in the wool GA people saying, I can't be dealing with it anymore. It's you know, the divide has become too great, and we're at a crisis point.
He says, by the way, Colin O'Rourke, to me the GPA is a Dublin-dominated organisation which has looked after its own very well. That's the tone is very much of an organisation which is looking after the few. The GPA look after the few. The GA traditionally stood out for the many until they sold out, he says. And talks about them going over to New York. When the New York GA community badly needs funds, he says New York is now seen as some type of GPA cash dispenser. So that's the general tone all the way through. So if we're in choppy waters, Vincent, to finish the GA discussion, one wonders how compatible the elite of county level is with the aims of people who just want to go out and play for their club of a given weekend for a start, and how you cater for a team which has the elite, the inter-county player and the club player for a start. I mean, I don't know how you do it ultimately and in different counties, but where is it all heading?
That's the million-dollar question, really. I don't pretend to know. I do feel that we're at a time in the GA where more people feel disenfranchised within the GA than have ever done in my lifetime. And the fixtures thing, as Cliona says, is incredibly difficult to see how you resolve that. And if you bear in mind that they've already, ring-fenced April for a club month and
brought the All-Irelands
forward,
yeah.
which I
radically
think was a marketing own goal, really. That September was such a specifically GA month in terms of the All-Irelands, and Premier League has just started at that stage, and it just seemed a really, to my mind, a bad decision to make. There's talk they may go back to September with the All-Irelands. I don't have any of the answers, Joe. I don't pretend to have any of the answers, but I do get this deep sense of there's two separate philosophies at play here, and one is the elite level of the GA, which is compelling to watch. It's wonderful, and the big days in Croke Park are it's terrific to watch, and the standards being set are just incredible. But the other side of all of this is the degree of volunteerism that the whole GA structure is based upon, and the sense right through the ground level of the GA in terms of volunteerism, of they're just being taken for granted, and that there is no real sense of care towards the volunteer side of the association. And I think it's something that Joe Brawley goes on about ad nauseum, and people probably feel he overdoes it at times. But I actually think we're very close to some kind of a tipping point here, where I don't know if there could be a strike action down the tracks, but I just think there's a huge element of unease and agitation bubbling under the surface at the moment.
And particularly with the figures, the amount of money that's being spent on inter-county teams, I think, as well, within counties, when they look at the figures, when volunteers down at club level look at those figures, as well as not having access to their players, they see that so much money is going into those players, and they're wondering what's the return for us. And
you also have that conflict that we've seen in Mayo, where you have volunteers then being asked to deal with a level of finance that is a corporate level of finance. So they're expected to have corporate levels of governance, but they're volunteers, and it's irreconcilable in my view what's going on.
Yeah, I would share that sense. I think it's irreconcilable. And there was a quote from somebody on the Mayo County Board in a Michael Foley piece a week or two ago, and he was making the point that 20 years ago the turnover was X, now it's into 3-4 million, whereas the county board shape and setup is exactly the same. We haven't evolved. But one of the reasons is, okay, on paper you'd say, well, we need to bring in professionals to look after this amount of money, but then you further the sense that everybody is getting paid except the players.
Exactly. If you put a paid CEO into each county, exactly, then you have everybody saying it's us and them again. Yeah, it is very, very complex. It's for sure.
We'll take a very short break. That's the GAA. We're back for a very final section, final few bits and pieces.
Off the ball. This is News Talk.
Have a great afternoon with Harvey Norman, with the best Black Friday sale deals right now on TVs and home appliances. Deals competitors just can't beat.
At Lexus, we have always anticipated the future, relentlessly pushing the boundaries of beautiful design and innovative technology, so you're ready for what's ahead. Introducing the new Lexus ES. Our executive saloon combines powerful, self-charging hybrid technology with an exceptional driving experience and the luxury that you expect from a Lexus. Test drive the new ES at your Lexus retailer and choose from a range of flexible payment options. Lexus. Experience amazing.
Bjork. Cornucopia Tour. 3 Arena this Thursday, November 28th. Tickets from $49.50 on sale now. Additional charges may apply. Don't miss Bjork live at 3 Arena this Thursday.
At Eason, it's Black Friday with blockbuster books at incredible prices, like Margaret Atwood's The Testaments, just $12.99. Donald Skean's Superfood in Minutes, $14.99. The Pippa Guide, $12.99. Jamie Heaslip's All In, $12.99. And Andrea Corr's Barefoot Pilgrimage, $9.99. Black Friday blockbuster prices, all available in-store and online. Eason, be inspired.
3, 2, 1, lift off!
What have you done with my OCT eye scanner? I'm supposed to be doing an eye scan with Mrs. Green.
We launched it, like you said.
I meant launch it to the public, not on a rocket. You know, by telling them how it takes a hospital-grade 3D image that could help detect eye conditions up to 4 years earlier.
Oh, sugar.
And that it's available at Specsavers.
And now also in outer space?
Introducing our most advanced eye exam with OCT scans. Search Specsavers OCT to find out more. Charge applies. OCT available at selected stores.
If you're looking for the perfect gift, Apple has something that's perfect for everyone. At CompuBee, we always aim for perfection too. That's why our Black Friday deals aren't just your everyday offers. Offers like 10% off MacBook Air, MacBook Pro, iMac and selected iPhone XS Max, 5% off iPhone and iPad, and many more available now. When you think Apple, think CompuBee, your Apple experts. Visit your local store or compubee.com. Terms, conditions and exclusions apply.
Describe Maynooth University in 3 words.
Skills for life.
Gives you choice.
Young, bold, progressive.
You're in control.
Feel so happy.
Maynooth University puts you first. Put Maynooth University first.
best decision ever.
Open days November 29th and 30th. Maynooth University. No bounds.
Hi, my name is Kate. Before I did the Camino walk in transition year, I went to Foot Solutions because I knew it would be really tough on my feet. The staff were great and fitted me with fantastic runners that gave me loads of support and cushioned my feet, so I didn't suffer from any blisters or soreness. What a relief. I guess I'm proof that you don't need a problem to visit Foot Solutions.
Visit Foot Solutions in Dublin, Cork, Waterford, Limerick, Galway and Newbridge, or visit footsolutions.ie.
It's time to trade up to a new Peugeot at Gowan Motors, Navan Road. Right now, selected Peugeots come with Peugeot Drive Time. That means flexible payment options, 5-year warranty, and up to €750 deposit contribution, or up to €4,000 scrappage allowance. Available now at Gowan Motors, Navan Road. Terms and conditions apply.
At Virgin Media, we believe in fair play. That's why we are freeing sport for all our TV customers. Want sport as standard on your plan? Done. Sit back and enjoy the thrilling action in football, rugby, GAA, and more on Virgin Media Sport and Air Sport 1. Together, we've got every kick, ruck, puck, and serve. So it's the perfect time to join. See virginmedia.ie. We free sport.
Selling your car? On CarZone, it's now even easier. In just 2 steps, you can advertise on Ireland's trusted motoring marketplace for selling used cars viewed by 1 million car buyers every month. Download the CarZone app or check out carzone.ie. CarZone, Ireland's trusted motoring marketplace.
Off the ball. This is News Talk.
Welcome back. Final few bits and pieces on the Sunday papers. So before we get to Rafa Benitez out in China doing his interviews, John Giles on page 3 of the Sunday Times main section is there. And the headline is, Giles, I gave FAI my rights for free. Why did it pay someone else? Former Ireland star baffled at football body's decision to give former friend $500,000 for foundation idea. So John Giles here is talking to Mark Tighe and Paul Rowan about the situation. Back in August, you might remember, the Sunday Times revealed that Martin, a former League of Ireland player, was paid €300,000 by the FAI in 60 tranches of €5,000 over 5 years. They also say it can now be revealed that the Football Association also paid Martin a lump sum of €200,000 as part of a contract agreed in September 2008. Contract stated Martin was being paid for devising the idea of the John Giles Foundation and a collective kit purchasing plan. John Giles here has made a few points, including, although Mr. Martin originally came up with the idea of the foundation and the Walk of Dreams, he never had any involvement in the foundation. And John Giles says, I was happy to put my name to what I believed to be a worthy cause. I still believe that it's a great cause and a worthwhile project. He questions why the FAI needed to pay Martin since he had already agreed to give the association his image rights for no cost. So he handed over his image rights at no cost. He reveals he was, quote, totally shocked that such an agreement was considered by the FAI. He's amazed as well, he says, that a draft document on the FAI files stated he had granted his personality rights to Martin and that vast sums were to be paid to Martin for these rights. I had already given my image rights to the FAI voluntarily, he said. At the end of the piece, they write that Martin was unaware Giles had signed an agreement with the FAI for his image rights before the agreement in 2008, and the FAI declined to comment. There we are. Another Sunday Times where you're reading about the FAI and wondering what was going on, when and why and who, and it's all quite complicated. And John Giles has a different perspective to Con Martin here, and the FAI aren't commenting, and I don't suspect they will. And there are reports imminent where the accounts won't be pretty. So there we are. We rumble on. It's different day.
They always say, and people who work in sport always say it's bad when you see sport on the news pages. And in the Mail on Sunday today as well, there's some news elements in the news section as well on the Limerick hurlers and a few events that have happened recently. But I always think it's a good day when you see sport in the news pages, because what we want is transparency and clarity, and governance should be good and things should be done properly. So I always think it's a good day, and as we said before in here, Mark Tighe and Paul Rowan have done the sport of football, and people at grassroots in football a great service, you know, by asking hard questions and finding the stuff out.
It was a hell of a year. I think it was Malachy Clerkin who tweeted at the recent Journalism Awards that Mark Tighe wins the Mark Tighe Award for Journalist of the Year.
For being Mark Tighe.
For being Mark Tighe, yeah. So he's had a hell of a run and it's still going there. So that's in the Sunday Times main section if you want to dig into the nitty-gritty of that. Rafa Benitez is out in China pulling in £12 million per year net. Rafa Benitez. So if you're worried about him because he's not involved in the Premier League and you're thinking, where is Rafa these days? Is he on the Wirral waiting for a call? No, he's not. He's earning 12 million net, having a grand time in China.
I think Rob Draper's interview with him in the Mail sums it up, the heading. So, Rafa, what did attract you to the billionaire Chinese league?
And he makes a good effort of trying to say it's the football that's really exciting him. Well, he just loves coaching so much.
He has this great word that he uses all the time, is project.
He loves the project.
And it's a major project. But what's really eye-watering is the scale of what they're doing. I mean, a £230 million training ground that the football club Dalian Yifang are building. It will have 23 pitches and mimics Real Madrid's, except it's bigger and better. Like we've seen certain players probably in the autumn of their careers going to the Chinese Super League and these extraordinary salaries that they can get over there. It's hard to even imagine. It's hard to get your head around the finance that is underpinning this.
Yeah.
And this is the first time I've actually read something that gives you a glimpse of it. Like, the people running the club are Wanda, the £27 billion construction, real estate and entertainment conglomerate who sold their 17% stake in Atletico Madrid to divert their energy here back home. And the club is run by Wang Yinlin, the 90th richest man in the world. It's extraordinary stuff. I mean,
they seem to have flown Jonathan Northcroft and Rob Draper by the looks of things out.
Over to the piece,
the piece,
absolutely. Now, I have to say, I'm a Liverpool supporter, I'll always have a fondness for Rafa, and I still think he comes across quite well in it. But the idea, like, he does make the point, and I think this is very pointed. He says, if I finish my contract here, I will not be 70 years old, I will be 61. He's already thinking
ahead.
And, you know, you kind of sense deep down when he took that job, he couldn't have imagined the Spurs job was going to be coming up 6 months later. And you can tell from reading it that he's already got his eye on the next project.
He sure has.
And it's funny.
12 million is 12 million.
Well, but it's the pace of it as well. And it's what struck me about it is, and I'm really interested that we haven't, and nobody, I don't know whether anybody, I haven't seen anything on Jim McGuinness's time in China working in Chinese football, because we have no concept of, I think football is, so much of our coverage is European based and home based. I mean, we don't even cover much American football. But the pace and the Richard Attenborough's Seven Worlds is on at the moment, and we were watching it last week and thinking, we know nothing about China, like the size of it, the concepts of it. This club, right, that they're building, Benitez shows photos of those pitches that Vincent is talking about when he arrived in June. Back then it was a cow field, right? They're going to open it in January. The pace in China, we were at the Olympics and I remember saying, you can see, and I'm sure people have come back from Japan or something, you can almost see the buildings going up as you're passing by. The speed of progress, the scale of everything and the scale of the money that they're putting into football is incredible.
World's richest country by 2030, isn't that what we're hearing?
Yeah.
That's where it's going.
So it's really, I thought it's just really interesting about the pace of development, not just money, but like how driven it is.
And they're the Chinese government have got behind football there as well, and so one of the rules is you can have 3 superstar players, they call them, and the rest have to be Chinese players. So they will actually identify some of the best talent, send them over to Spanish clubs where they have links, and then bring them back to play in the Chinese league.
They've brought 10 Spanish FA coaches to work in the local primary schools. Like, that's the level you're dealing with here.
By the way, Newcastle fans, there's just an amazing scene, which is just, like if you kind of always looked at the Mike Ashley thing and thought, I feel that club's a mess. Like, even you'll be shocked at this. So last year, when the Benitez time at Newcastle's come into an end, Mike Ashley brings them down to the JD Sports office in London, and they're sitting there, but they're in, like, we've all been in those offices where there's about 3 or 4 microwaves in the room, and it's not fit for this kind of meeting. And basically, he wants to give Benitez an 8-year contract, but he also wants to sign 2 players Benitez doesn't want. Benitez feels he can't commit. And so there's a bit of a standoff in the meeting, and Benitez goes outside to wait for a minute, and then he comes back in to renegotiate again with Ashley. And then, as Rob Draper says, but the break in proceedings meant that there was some confusion over the status of the dining area. One member of staff had strolled in to heat up his lunch in the communal microwave. It was pointed out that a meeting of some consequence was about to resume. The employee offered profuse apologies and insisted he would be a couple of minutes. But he couldn't work the microwave. It had a 4-minute setting, but his lunch required only 2 minutes. Eventually, Benitez interjected, "You could put it on for 4 minutes and stop the microwave after 2. The employee agreed. It was a fine compromise, but it was to prove the last achieved that day. Benitez's Newcastle career could not be similarly reheated." Like, that is just unbelievably brilliant.
I wonder, was the employee's name Rodney?
Oh my God. It's like something out of The Office. And what microwave only has a 4-minute setting is another question. What the hell's going on there? So that's Rafa, who's getting by just fine.
Yeah, this is a very, very interesting thing. He's never, ever liked Mourinho. And I look at the quote where he's asked about Mourinho going to Spurs, and he says, "Pochettino was doing a great job, as we know. Mourinho is a manager of experience."
Yeah. Speaking of Mourinho, Ollie Holt gets to the point here.
Oh, does he ever?
In the first 2 paragraphs.
Football's #1 narcissist.
He eviscerates Mourinho, and which is very unusual, because you kind of think you'd wait until things the cracks start to appear.
Yeah.
But Ollie Holt goes in with both.
He's committing early.
Studs are up on both sides. The truth is that within a few months, sooner, if things don't start well, the same old traits will be exhibiting themselves again. Heavy hints that he is working at a terrible disadvantage to his rivals, veiled criticism of recruitment policy, allegations of conspiracies against him, reminders of his glorious past, veiled criticisms of his players, and demands for respect. My guess is Mourinho and Tottenham will be over inside 2 years. So where you had the beautiful sarcasm of Barney Ronay's match report, this is studs up. This just goes in, and clearly they didn't get on in their past relationships, presumably when he was at United or Chelsea.
And clearly he's not going to be dealing with them in the near future either.
He's not going to be getting a one-to-one interview anytime soon.
He said at the start of the second paragraph was, he is the guy who will take your club and turn it into scorched earth.
Yeah.
There's no holding back there.
At this stage, I totally agree. Be amazed if it didn't go that way.
Well, I'm inclined to agree as well. Yeah, I'm amazed. But it's the return of football's #1 narcissist, and there's stiff competition for that title. I give it 2 years.
Yeah. So that is pretty much just done, unless there's anything you want to point people towards.
Yeah, just because we were talking about Asian football there. There's a nice piece by Mark Gallagher, who I always say, manages to get really original content always and find little stories that other people don't find. And he's done a really nice piece with a guy called Conor Nestor, who was an ex-Limerick FC under-19 coach, and who has coached the team to win Cambodia's league and almost done a double out there this year, and how he has ended up coaching in Cambodia. So it's a really nice piece. Just shows you really where sport can take you sometimes. And interesting as well on the pull of football in a country that has such an awful history.
Yeah. That's in the Mail on Sunday. We were saying Mark Gallagher often gets something that nobody else has thought of.
Yeah, he's brilliant.
He's
just
absolutely brilliant, isn't it?
Yeah.
And then Zach Muradi, by the way, is with Dennis Walsh. I think people will be familiar with Zach playing hurling for Leitrim, and he's talking to Dennis about settling in and coming from Iraq and being born when the Gulf War was on, to somehow pitching up over here and settling in. We've had him in studio a couple of times.
Yeah, he
really
did.
Good fella.
He's done a first-person piece, probably ghost written, I'd say, but the Sports Chronicle, that's really worth a look, because it's the best piece that I've seen, and it's in his own words, and it is a really powerful piece, especially in light of there's been so much problems at the moment, people trying to looking for refugee status in this country. It goes right to the heart of it.
Okay. Guys, thanks so much for coming in. Appreciate it. Giving up your Sunday. Vincent Hogan, you'll be in the Irish Independent, I'm sure, tomorrow. And Cliona Foley, also presenter of Off the Bench here as well, and Off the Ball. Thanks very much. We'll take a short break. We'll be talking rugby in the next hour, looking back on round 2 of the Heineken Champions Cup.
Everybody reacts differently to the shocking affordability of the Dacia Duster. The opportunist, I've heard enough, where do I sign? The skeptics, 0 deposit, too good to be true. And our competitors, shocked into silence. The Dacia Duster from just €75 per week and absolutely 0 deposit. Whatever your reaction is to Ireland's most affordable car brand, there's one waiting for you. Visit your